This is Jack Rice for Air America Radio. I'm here with Joanne Sandler, the Deputy Executive Director of the UN Development Fund for Women. Joanne, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having us.
You know, it was last year that I was in Darfur, and I'm looking in the face of a 21-year-old woman who had been taken as a slave and gang raped for 7-8 years before she was released. It seems to me that it's a very abstract concept until you look somebody in the face. What I can tell you is after that, it fundamentally changed everything that I see and how I see it. I got 4 daughters at home, and this woman looked just like one of mine. How difficult is this topic, not just to gain the attention, because people will hear it and go, oh my gosh, but to actually keep people's attention?
I mean, partly the question is whose attention do you want to keep? Now, for UNIFEM, we're the UN Women's Fund, we want to grab the attention of the UN Security Council, because the UN Security Council can actually do something about that. The issue of sexual violence, of rape, is a long-standing one and probably one of the most invisible and unattended to crimes. It is now used, Jack. I mean, your point is interesting because now sexual violence is used as a tactic of war. The argument we've been trying to make is that sexual violence is an issue of national and international security, and it deserves a security response. The good news is that the Security Council is now paying attention to sexual violence. In June of last year, with the leadership of the United States and other countries, the Security Council agreed to Resolution 1820 on sexual violence. Now, the importance of that is that means that the Security Council can now mandate peacekeepers to actually provide protection to women. There are ways to prevent sexual violence, and I think one of the real breakthroughs is the notion that it is not inevitable. There are measures that can be taken to reduce sexual violence significantly.
I like the way that sounds, but I worry because part of this has to do with resources, and you're setting priorities. And what I keep hearing, and I've heard this from others, is that if we're going to stop murder, we stop murder, assuming they have the priorities or even the resources, and I have frequently found that they don't. The idea that they're going to stop rape, frankly, seems to fall somewhere second, third, fourth, or fifth. And while it's a great effort, a great idea, I'm sorry, I don't see it. Right. I really don't.
So let me give you some examples. For instance, a large proportion of women and girls get raped when they're out looking for fuel, water, and other things because they're living in refugee camps or internally displaced camps. Now, we did an inventory of ad hoc practices that militaries were using to try to protect women in the absence of a mandate to do so. And so the militaries themselves, for instance, in Congo, the African Union mission, was going out at night and shining lights on paths that women walked on and honking their horns to create safe passage for them. That does actually reduce their vulnerability to rape. Now, if that were a standard practice as opposed to an ad hoc practice, imagine how many lives you could save, how many lives you could save from being ruined. So, can we stop rape? Not immediately. Can we put a dent in it? I think the fact is that there are ways, there are proven ways. And what we're calling for is exactly what you're saying, that the resources be allocated, human and financial resources, that the standard operating procedures be respected, that militaries have a responsibility to protect women from rape.
Do you see the SC actually stepping up and doing this? It doesn't sound, what you're saying doesn't sound complicated to me.
Exactly.
And frequently, because it doesn't sound complicated, it sounds like something the SC is not even going to deal with.
No, I think the Security Council has absolutely been seized with this issue. It is a complex issue. As you say, we're not going to turn around and say we've eradicated rape. But what we're trying to, the framework that we're trying to promote is that rape is not an inevitable consequence of war. It is actually a tactic of war. And just like any other tactic of war, it can be confronted. So the Security Council, I think, has absolutely taken some measures that are important, but we hope that they will take more. The Security Council, 10 years ago, the Security Council agreed to a resolution on women, peace, and security. From that time, for instance, when Security Council members travel to countries in conflict, they now much more regularly meet with groups of women to hear what women are saying about what women's priorities are for protection, for conflict resolution. Now, again, that's not a giant leap forward, but it's a step forward. It's the kind of step that we need to take. And then we need to see many more women in leadership, for instance, as peace negotiators. You know, of the peace agreements that we've reviewed, only 7% of peace negotiators have been women. Only 2% of signatories to peace agreements have been women. If women aren't at the table to be talking about what peace deals need to include in relation to sexual violence, then it won't be in the deal. So we need women there. We also need, obviously, men who take this as an important issue. One of the things that we're doing with our UN system partners at the end of June is pulling together very experienced peace negotiators to talk about how we get the issue of ending sexual violence into peace agreements rather than impunity for sexual violence as one of the cards that get traded when peace deals get signed.
In the end, do you see additional resources being allocated for this? Again, it almost sounds like it wouldn't be that expensive in just small areas to have some sort of consistent approach to this. And I would imagine there aren't going to be a lot of people who would say, no, this isn't important, but will they step up and allocate those resources?
There are more resources now than there were, say, 10 years ago, although we don't have a good baseline, but it is pathetically small. The analysis we've done of post-conflict budgets and humanitarian appeals have infinitesimal amounts of resources for these kinds of things. So absolutely we need much greater commitment, advocacy, leadership from the United States and many other countries to say, put the resources behind the commitment. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much.
This is Jack Rice for Air America Radio.